Today we're talking about team structure. It is within the resource plan building block and part of our strategic marketing playbook. So there you'll see on the right-hand side is the resource plan building block. It's how you're going to resource, how are you going to make sure the marketing team functions. The deliverables include the resource plan overview, and you'll be going back to this a lot for all of these deliverables. So I highly recommend you start there first and have that available. The second one is the team structure, and that's what we're talking about today. So what is team structure? We're defining it as how you will resource marketing, including the relationships between the activities, leadership, and team members, both internally and externally. The steps to create a team structure: first, you start with reviewing the resource plan overview inputs that you've just done. You assess the current internal roles and responsibilities and the external research scopes. Then you review best practices, which we'll show you for both internal and external resources. Then we also have reviewing marketing roles by level guidelines that will help you understand what type of work and what type of people go in the different internal levels. And then you draft a few team structure options. Generally, you need to think about it a variety of ways based on your business need. You have to get team leadership feedback on this, making sure everyone's grounded. And then you finalize the new team structure. So let's get started. Here's just a quick snapshot of what the resource plan overview inputs are. We looked at the current team structure, and here's an example. The scope, and we did an analysis between what we need and what we have, and we did some gaps there, and we did the same thing for capabilities. And then we looked at what are the opportunities and constraints we need to consider. And then at the end, we provided an overview of what you really need to think about, the insights and the indicated action. So all of those were things you did within the resource plan overview. So please make sure you've got that ready. It really is a core to all of this. So the next thing you do is you have all that in mind and you say, okay, I'm going to assess the current internal roles and responsibilities. You need to look at the job descriptions for the roles. If you don't have one for each role, you just need to outline it, document it. Then you need to look at the current project list and what are the major buckets of work. You don't need to get down to every single detail at this point. You can, but you don't have to. And you need to figure out about how much time are people spending on those. In some cases, we've done a time study where you ask everybody to track their time over a couple of weeks, and that will help you. But that's not necessary all the time. Then you need to talk what's working, what's not working with both the team and then getting feedback from leadership. Sometimes people do this with other functions as well, and sometimes you just don't need to do that level of detail. So the things you ask are the job descriptions describing the work that needs to be done? Are people actually performing the tasks in the job descriptions? Or is anyone or everyone performing tasks that are not listed in those job descriptions? Then you create a list of opportunities and gaps for current roles and responsibilities. So here's an example. I have just a very basic job description. You'll see lots of those all over. Then here are a couple of the insights of one of the ones we did. So the job descriptions did describe the work that needed to be done. The marketing director was performing tasks on everyone's job description. The project manager and the specialist were not performing all of their job responsibilities. And the marketing team were managing many non-marketing responsibilities. And they didn't have capacity to manage external resources. So those are just some high-level bullets as an example of what we did with internal roles and responsibilities. So you take that and you do the same thing for external scopes. You get all the scope documents, and if you can't find them, that's something to consider. You need to know what your external resources, agencies, freelancers, you name it, are doing. Then you do the similar thing as you did for internal. What is the current project list? Identify the major buckets of work and how much time for each. It's harder to do a time study for this, but or you can do it a little bit differently, asking the agency to help you with that or the resource. And then again, discuss what's working, what's not working. And then what do the scopes describe? Are they actually describing what you need done? Are the people performing the tasks in the scopes? Is the team performing tasks that are not in the scopes? Or are they doing things that maybe they're actually not being paid for, so to speak? And then the same thing, list of opportunities and gaps for those current external scopes. So here's an example. You'll see a couple of scopes over on the right. One's a digital, the far right, and then one for PR. And then you'll see there are lots of agencies. One of the things we identified on this one, there were several agencies working on things. Some were overlapping. The video agency was providing digital advertising, but they didn't actually have that expertise. They had just jumped in to help. The graphic designer actually doesn't even have a scope, and they do a ton of work. And the advertising agency isn't actually performing all their duties in the scope. Now they're doing other things. There was nothing bad going on. It just wasn't well organized. So this is an example of some of the things to consider for external scopes. So then you look at, as you're trying to figure out this team structure, what should internal teams do versus external resources? So here are the couple of things, and I'm sure this list could be longer, but the biggest piece is internal teams have to own the mission critical roles. They need to orchestrate all the activities. You really shouldn't have an external resource doing that. They create the marketing strategies based on the company strategies. That's how you make sure marketing's aligned with the business. They are the ones to provide targets, deliverables, and metrics. And this needs to be based on return on investment. And they need to provide the perspective about the company, operations, culture, you name it. But they also need to own the data and the technology. We shouldn't let people outside of our company own things that, at the very best, you should have responsibility for. At the very worst, could be at risk. So then external resources, they have specialized skills, experience, flexibility. A lot of times digital, social, web, content like it's writing or graphic design, lots of advertising or market research or consumer research. If you need a lot of lead generation, we oftentimes see external agencies, firms doing that. And then, or if you need pretty significant project management across things, a lot of times they'll pull it in. They should be responsible for execution tracking, analysis, and recommendations of their key work. And they need to be able to collaborate with other agencies. But that's the key piece of what external resources should be doing. So then here's just a guide of 4 basic levels: the executive level, the director level, the manager level, and the more entry level specialist coordinator, you name it, level. I won't go into detail here, but this is a resource for you to say about how each role works and about the amount of experience they have. This is a good role when you're looking at the levels in the organization. So then you take all of that, you looked at all these pieces, and then you develop. This is one example of a team structure. The difference is we had from the previous, we didn't have the right external resources, so we cleaned those up. In this situation also, we had the same number of internal roles and they were all full-time. We reduced one of the levels, and we also changed the reporting to the COO. And in the past, it was to someone in sales. So we made some changes and this was all aligned, but this is an example of what you'd see. Very simple. This isn't meant to be complicated. The next step is getting into the internal roles, which is where a little bit more complexity comes in. So let's recap. Team structure is all about how you'll resource marketing, including the relationships between activities, leadership, and team members, both internally and externally, how it's all going to work together at a high level. Then here are the steps. You review the resource plan as we talked, look at both internal and external roles and scopes, look at best practices, look at the roles by level guidelines, draft them. I'm sure there'll be iterations, and then you finalize. So that's it. I hope you feel more confident in developing your team structure.